The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint hum of traffic outside the airport's grand terminal. The lights of Los Angeles glittered like 1,000 tiny promises, but inside the exclusive restaurant tucked away in the first class lounge, a very different kind of story was about to unfold. I sat in the corner wearing a simple gray hoodie, the hood drawn slightly forward over my head. To anyone passing by, I was just another traveler, tired, quiet, maybe even a little out of place. My jeans were worn at the knees, my boots had scuff marks from too many miles, and the old leather backpack at my feet looked like it had been dragged through every corner of the earth. But that was fine. I wasn't here to be noticed. I had learned long ago that there's a kind of peace in being invisible and sitting silently while the world rushes around you. People here were too busy, too wrapped up in their own importance to wonder who the man in the hoodie was. The restaurant itself was dazzling. Golden chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen sunlight. Polished marble floors reflected the glow of crystal glasses and silver cutlery. The air smelled of truffle butter, roasted lamb, and expensive wine. It was the kind of place where every plate was a statement, every laugh a performance, and every glance a silent competition about who had more, who looked better, who belonged. I leaned back in my seat, listening to the conversation swirling around me. Deals were being made over oysters and champagne. Vacations to private islands were being planned between courses. A woman boasted about her new diamond necklace. A man bragged about closing a multi-million-dollar deal before breakfast. This was a sanctuary for the wealthy. But sometimes sanctuaries hide lessons. Sometimes the walls that glitter with wealth are the very stage where arrogance reveals itself. That night, it didn't take long. The doors opened, and a man stepped inside. He didn't walk in. He stormed, in as if the ground beneath him was a red carpet rolled out for his shoes alone. His name was Victor Harding, a businessman whose reputation was whispered in financial circles across the city. Some said he was ruthless. Others said he was brilliant. He liked both descriptions. Victor's suit was cut from the finest Italian wool, pressed so sharply it could draw blood. His shoes shone with a mirror finish, and his watch, a massive golden timepiece, was deliberately displayed as he raised his hand to adjust his cufflink. He was the kind of man who thought money wasn't just power, it was identity. As he passed through the restaurant, heads turned. Some admired him, envious of his wealth. Others rolled their eyes at his theatrics. He smiled, basking in the attention, scanning the room as if to remind everyone, "I'm the man you wish you were." I watched him quietly from beneath my hood. I had met his type before many times. Men who carried themselves with arrogance instead of grace. Men who believed the world owed them deference. Then something shifted. At the other end of the restaurant, an elderly man shuffled in. His clothes were neat but faded with time, the color of his coat washed out by years of wear. His shoes were cracked at the edges, his steps unsteady but determined. In his hand he clutched a worn leather wallet, its seams frayed, its corners bent, as though it had lived a lifetime of hardship with him. The maître d' hesitated. I saw the flicker of judgment in his eyes, the silent calculation of whether this man belonged here. Before the silence could become cruel, a waitress stepped forward. Her name was Lena. Her uniform was crisp, but her eyes revealed exhaustion. The kind only those who carry too much responsibility too young can know. She smiled at the old man with warmth that melted the tension. "Right this way, sir," she said gently, offering her arm. The old man gave a small bow of his head. His face was lined, not just with age, but with years of stories untold. He moved, carefully, but with dignity, as Lena guided him to a small table near the aisle. Victor noticed, and when he noticed, he smirked. His eyes gleamed with the kind of disdain that is sharper than words. He glanced around, seeking an audience, and then his gaze landed on me. I felt it, that look, that judgment. He leaned closer, his voice dripping with mockery. "First class, huh? They'll let anyone in here these days." I turned my head, met his eyes, and gave a small nod. My voice was calm, steady, deliberate. "The world," is full of surprises. He frowned, clearly dissatisfied. Men like him didn't just want to be heard. They wanted to dominate, they wanted to win. And as I turned back toward the window, letting silence fill the space, I could sense it. The story was just beginning. Something unforgettable was about to happen. Something that would make every soul in that golden restaurant question what it really means to have wealth, and what it truly means to be rich. The glass doors at the far end of the restaurant slid open with a mechanical whisper, but the man who entered didn't need any grand announcement. He was one. The kind of man who could silence a room without saying a word. I noticed him before anyone else did. He walked in with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, every step echoing against the marble floor. His shoes, black and polished so finely they mirrored the golden light above, clicked sharply with each stride. His suit was tailored to perfection, navy fabric hugging his shoulders like it was sculpted for him alone. A crimson tie hung neatly, a statement of power rather than style. But it wasn't the suit or the shoes that drew the eyes of the room. It was the watch. Gold, heavy. The kind of timepiece that wasn't meant to tell time, but to remind you of how much money someone could spend to measure it. He moved his wrist often, adjusting his cuff, brushing imaginary dust off his sleeve, checking the time, though the giant grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly enough for all to hear. Each motion was deliberate, a performance. People noticed. They always do. I caught snippets of whispers as he passed. Is that the new Swiss Chronomaster? Costs more than my house. Look at the shine on that suit. That's custom tailored for sure. One woman let her gaze linger on him longer than she probably intended. A man at the bar narrowed his eyes, lips tightening with envy. Victor loved it. He soaked it all in like sunlight, the admiration and resentment feeding something inside him. When he reached the maitre d', he didn't bother with pleasantries. He didn't smile or say good evening. Instead, he snapped his fingers. Table. Now, he commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a sharpness like a whip crack in the air. The maitre d' gave a small, almost nervous bow. Of course, sir. Right this way. Victor followed, shoulders squared, chin lifted. It was clear that in his world, people didn't just serve him. They existed for him. His presence seemed to ripple outward, commanding attention, demanding recognition. As he passed, I watched waiters scatter like startled birds, rushing to clear his path. One young busboy nearly tripped over himself trying to move a cart out of the way before Victor could brush against it. Victor smirked, clearly enjoying the scene. Careful, son, he said with a low chuckle. These shoes cost more than you make in a month. The boy flushed red, muttered an apology, and wheeled the cart away faster. I kept my head low, but inside something tightened in my chest. I had seen men like this before, men who measured their worth in dollar signs, who believed humility was weakness, who saw kindness as wasted energy. Victor finally arrived at his seat. He looked at his ticket again, as though to reassure himself of his rightful place in the world. Then he paused. His expression shifted. He looked down, then up again, and a frown pulled at his lips, because the seat beside his, the one marked 2A, was mine. I could feel his gaze burning into me, scanning me up and down. My hoodie, my worn jeans, my scuffed boots, the backpack, at my feet. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered under his breath, but loud enough for the passengers around us to hear. He shook his head, letting out a short, sharp laugh. First class, huh? Guess they'll let anyone in here these days. I turned my head slowly toward him. For a moment our eyes locked. His were sharp and cold, full of judgment. Mine, I hoped, were calm. Yeah, I said quietly. The world is full of surprises. He blinked, as if my response wasn't the one he expected. He was waiting for me to snap back, to defend myself, maybe even to apologize for existing in his space. But instead I gave him nothing but silence and a small servant, the most expensive you have. None of that cheap stuff. This is first class after all. The attendant nodded politely and poured the golden liquid into a tall glass. Victor swirled it as if he were a connoisseur, inhaled the bouquet theatrically, and then took a long, exaggerated sip. Ah, he sighed. Now this is what life is about. Luxury, comfort, the best of everything. And it's all mine. I could hear him muttering to himself, but the words weren't really for him. They were for everyone else, for the audience he so desperately craved. When the attendant turned to me with the same polite smile, I looked up. "Just water, please," I said. Her hand hesitated on the bottle, almost surprised. She poured the clear liquid into a glass and placed it gently on my tray. Victor snorted, unable to hold back his disdain. "Water?" he asked, his tone dripping with mockery. "Don't tell me you're really going to waste the experience of first class on water?" I took the glass, lifted it slightly in a small gesture of thanks to the attendant, and sipped. "I'm fine with this," I said, my voice as even as ever. Sometimes simplicity is enough. Around us, I heard the subtle rustle of clothing as passengers shifted in their seats. Eyes flickered toward us, watching, waiting. Victor leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear, though his mocking smirk told me he didn't care if anyone else caught it. "Yeah, that works for people who settle for less, but me, I don't settle. I take what I deserve. That's why I belong here. That's why I'll always belong here." I let the words sink in. I didn't rush to reply. I had learned, through years of hardship and silence, that sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the most hollow. I looked him in the eyes again, steady, calm. "Maybe," I said softly, "but maybe the best is different for everyone. Maybe what you call luxury isn't really luxury at all." He frowned. For a moment there was a crack in the armor. He turned away as if my words had reached a place he didn't want anyone to see. He brought the glass to his lips again, but this time his hand wasn't steady. The restaurant hummed with an uncomfortable silence, as though the chandeliers themselves were holding their breath. People were watching. Not me. Not Victor. They were watching the space between us, sensing something building. And deep down, I knew something was coming. Something that would test not just him, but me too. Because in this room of wealth and power, where pride gleamed brighter than the chandeliers, the true meaning of respect was about to be revealed. And no one, not even the man with the golden watch, was ready for what would happen next. Today on the show, we're diving into the world of economic indicators. These are the numbers that tell us how the economy is doing. Things like GDP, unemployment rates, and consumer confidence. But what do these indicators really mean? How are they calculated? And how should we interpret them? We'll break it all down for you with the help of some experts to make sense of the numbers that shape our world. Scene 2. The waitress's kindness. From my corner table, I could read the room, the way a fighter reads an opponent. Small tells, quick glances, the energy shifts. But the one person who moved differently than everyone else was the waitress with the tired eyes and the steady smile. Lena. She couldn't have been more than 24, 25. Her hair was tucked back neatly, a few wisps escaping as the night wore on. Her posture was professional, but I caught the way she rolled her shoulder between tables like someone who'd been carrying more than just trays. She spoke softly, but her voice had warmth in it. Real warmth. Not the kind you paste on for tips, the kind that says, "I see you." When she passed my table the first time, she offered the same gentle smile she gave everyone else. "Good evening," she said, placing a glass of water with a lime wedge. "If you need anything at all, I'm Lena. I'll be looking after you." "Thanks," I said, and meant it. She moved on. A couple at the center wanted an extra bottle of red. A table of executives needed their Wagyu in particular temperatures, like the meat owed them loyalty. Lena handled each one with respectful patience. But I noticed what no one else bothered to see. A small adhesive bandage on her knuckle. A faint red mark at the crease of her jaw. Like she'd been awake too long and was running on stubbornness and coffee. Twice she slipped into the back hallway near the kitchen, pulling out her phone just long enough to read a message, then sliding it back in with a deep, slow breath. The second time it vibrated again and I saw it, a contact name with a small heart beside it. Noah. When she returned to the dining room, a man in a charcoal suit snapped his fingers. "Miss, over here. We're ready to order now." He spoke, like a judge handing down a sentence. Lena turned, smiled, stepped in. "Of course, sir." She didn't flinch. She didn't fold. She just absorbed it, redirected it, kept the service moving. That's a skill most people don't recognize. But I did. I'd seen the same composure in the ring and on sets. The look of someone who decides privately and firmly, not tonight. Not going to break tonight. The doors opened again. This time, quietly. An elderly man stepped into the restaurant like he was entering a church. He stood at the threshold for a moment, unsure, the way people do when they aren't certain they belong. His coat was clean but threadbare along the cuffs, the color faded from too many winters. His shoes had a gentle shine, cracked at the edges, polished by someone who still cared. He held his hat against his chest, and in his right hand, a small brown leather wallet soft with age. The host hesitated. He glanced out over the room at the gold, the crystal, the watch that announced itself every time Victor moved his hand. The calculation flickered there just for a second in the host's eyes. Does he fit? And then, before that thought could harden into rejection, Lena was there. "Right this way, sir," she said, stepping in front of the host like a shield. Her smile softened as if she'd been expecting him. She offered her arm lightly. The old man blinked, surprised, then smiled back with a grateful dignity. He nodded once, gentleman to lady, and let her guide him. "Thank you, dear," he said, voice warm but fragile around the edges. I wasn't sure I had the right place." "You have exactly the right place," Lena replied. "You're with me." She led him past tables where diamonds flashed and laughter rang a little too loud. Past Victor, who had angled his chair just enough to be in the room's sightline. He saw them and a half-grin tugged at his mouth. The kind of grin people wear when cruelty feels clever. Lena chose a small table near the aisle. A good table, actually. Accessible, quiet, with a clear view of the pianist and the window beyond. She pulled the chair out gently and helped the old man sit. She set a cloth napkin in his lap with a respectful care most guests never notice. "My name is Lena," she said, placing a menu in front of him. "Would you like some water to start? Or perhaps tea? We have chamomile and peppermint." He looked embarrassed by the attention. "Water is fine, dear. Thank you." "And may I know your name?" Lena asked. He straightened, a hint of his old pride returning. "Harris?" he said. "Thomas Harris, but you can just call me Tom." "Nice to meet you, Tom," she smiled. "I'll be right back." As she turned, Victor let out a breathy chuckle. He didn't stop her, didn't address her. He just addressed the room, the way a man does when he wants everyone to hear him without taking responsibility for the words. "Wasting time on charity cases now?" he said, just loud enough. "Some of us actually have real bills to pay." I watched Lena pause just a fraction of a heartbeat before she moved on. She didn't give him the dignity of a glance. But I saw the way her hand tightened around the tray. She brought Mr. Harris a glass of water and set it down carefully. "Take your time, Tom," she said. "If the menu feels overwhelming, I can make a recommendation." He smiled at the kindness, then adjusted his glasses and opened the menu like it was a delicate book. up then, just to see if his words had landed. And do your job efficiently this time. No more strolling around being social with people who order soup. Lena kept her voice soft. I attend to all guests, sir. Oh? Victor smirked. Even the ones who can't pay properly? Lena's lips parted, then closed. She steadied herself. Sir, that gentleman is a guest like any other. No, Victor said, leaning back, stretching the word. He's not like any other. He's exactly the kind who drags a place like this down. You understand? There's a standard here. Standards matter. Lena held his gaze a second longer than politeness required. Yes, she said. They do. She turned away before he could fire another arrow. I watched her disappear into the kitchen. When she emerged again, she carried a small plate, a basket of warm bread, steam curling up like a promise. She set it down gently in front of Mr. Harris. I took the liberty of bringing this first, she said. The soup will be right behind. His face lit up, the kind of light you can't fake. I miss this smell, he said, inhaling. My wife used to bake. Our house always smelled like this. Butter. Warmth. Lena's smile softened. What was her name? He blinked. Evelyn, he said. She had a laugh that could fill a room. She sounds wonderful. Lena paused. I'll be right. Back Tom. She moved to the service station, refilled a water carafe, wiped the condensation off the base with a folded cloth. She was building herself small tasks to keep steady. I could see it. I knew it. The phone in her apron buzzed again. She glanced at it, just a quick peek. No. All good. Don't worry about me. Love you. Her jaw loosened. She exhaled. And then she was back on the floor. The soup arrived, shining beneath the golden light. A crock crowned with molten Gruyere. The kind of dish that whispers comfort before the spoon even breaks the surface. Lena set it down with a quiet reverence, as if she understood that not all meals are about hunger. Some are about memory. Careful, she said. It's hot. Mr. Harris nodded. He reached for the spoon, then paused. I'm sorry, he said, voice shaking slightly. Would you mind adding it to a separate plate, just the bread? I don't want to make a mess. Lena smiled. You're not making a mess, Tom. She tore a piece of bread for him, set it neatly beside the bowl. Enjoy. He took a careful sip, closed his eyes. I watched his shoulders drop just a little. Sometimes the smallest kindness is armor enough for a day. Victor let out an exaggerated sigh. How long are we going to babysit soup? He asked the girl. Some of us are waiting on real food. Some of us actually pay to be here. This time, Lena didn't walk past. She turned, faced him square on, and for a moment I saw the steel beneath her gentleness. Sir, she said quietly, your food is being prepared to your exact specifications. The humiliation. Mr. Harris ate slowly, savoring each spoonful of the steaming onion soup as if it were a feast. He paused often, not out of impatience, but to breathe in the aroma, to hold the taste longer on his tongue, to remember. Every bite seemed to take him somewhere else, maybe to Evelyn's kitchen where the smell of broth and bread used to welcome him home. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the spoon, but his smile never wavered. Around him, the restaurant continued in its rhythm, glasses clinking, knives against porcelain, bursts of laughter rising above the piano. Yet at his little table it felt like a world apart. Simple bread, a bowl of soup, and the dignity of being served like everyone else. When he finally set the spoon down, his eyes were bright, moist with something beyond the steam. That was wonderful, he whispered, as though offering thanks not only to Lena but to the universe itself. Lena approached with her notepad tucked away, her smile softer now. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Tom. He nodded, folded his napkin carefully, and reached into his jacket. Out came the weathered wallet, edges fraying, leather so worn it looked like fabric. He opened it with shaking fingers, pulling out a few bills and coins. He counted them slowly, his lips moving as he added, "The way someone does when every cent matters." Then his face changed. The confident dignity dimmed. He recounted, once, twice. His fingers searched the corners of the wallet, as though something might appear. A small coin rolled to the edge of the table, and he caught it just before it fell. He held it between his thumb and forefinger, stared at it, then set it down carefully with the others. His voice cracked. "I thought I had enough." The words were quiet, but in the hush of the restaurant they carried. Lena leaned closer, her heart tightening. "It's okay, Tom," she said gently. "Let me see." But before she could finish, another voice cut in. "Well, well." Vanessa, the glamorous flight attendant at Victor's table, smirked as she leaned back in her chair. Her diamond bracelet caught the light as she lifted her glass. "If you can't pay, you shouldn't be here. Places like this aren't for charity cases." The words slithered across the room. A few diners exchanged glances but said nothing. Victor seized the moment, his laughter booming like a bell. He slapped the table, his gold watch flashing. "I knew it," he shouted. "Broke, the old man's broke. Throw him out before he tries to wash dishes in the back." The room stiffened. Some guests laughed nervously, others shifted uncomfortably. But Victor fed on it, standing just enough to make himself visible. This is what happens when you let just anyone walk in. Standards, people. Standards. Mr. Harris lowered his head, clutching the wallet with both hands as though it might anchor him. His lips trembled, his eyes wet. I'm sorry," he whispered. I thought I had enough for the soup. I didn't mean to." Lena's instincts ignited. She stepped closer, protective, her hand half reaching toward the table. "That's enough," she said firmly, glaring at Victor. "He's a guest here. He deserves respect like everyone else." Her supervisor appeared from behind the bar, sharp suit, sharper eyes. He shook his head at her, almost invisible but unmistakable. A warning, do not interfere. Lena froze, torn. Her throat tightened, her hands clenched at her sides. She wanted to speak, to shield Mr. Harris from the cruelty, but she knew the risk. Her job, her brother's medicine, everything depended on this paycheck. Mr. Harris fumbled with the coins, trying desperately to count again, though he already knew. His fingers shook and one coin slipped, clattering loudly against the floor. The sound echoed, cruel in its finality. He bent, painfully slow, to retrieve it. When he rose, tears had pooled at the corners of his eyes. He pressed the wallet shut, clutching it to his chest like a wounded bird. His breath came shallow, uneven. "I'm so sorry," he said again, barely audible. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." The restaurant went still. Forks rested mid-air. Conversations halted. Even the pianist's hands stilled on the keys. For one unbearable moment, the grand restaurant, all its chandeliers and marble, its wealthy patrons and sparkling glasses, felt smaller than the courage it took for an old man to admit he had nothing. And in that silence, every eye turned, waiting to see what would happen next. Scene 4. The Rock observes in the corner of the restaurant. The man in the gray hoodie hadn't moved since the old man's trembling apology. He sat with the kind of stillness that wasn't weakness, it was control. His back straight, shoulders broad but relaxed, hands folded loosely on the table. The chaos swirled around him. Victor's cruel laughter, Vanessa's smirks, the uneasy silence of the diners. But he remained calm, like a mountain in the storm, unmoved. He hadn't touched his drink in nearly an hour. The glass of water sat untouched on the linen tablecloth, catching fragments of chandelier light. From where I sat, it looked like he was waiting. thought the room was still his. The man in the hoodie didn't react. He didn't flinch or rise to the insult. His expression remained calm, his eyes steady on Victor, as though he were studying him, measuring him, not in contempt, but with something heavier. The silence deepened. It was a silence that made hearts race because it wasn't just quiet. It was anticipation. Victor tapped his champagne glass against the table. "What? Cat got your tongue?" He pressed, trying to draw laughter from the crowd again. "Or are you smart enough to stay out of things that don't concern you?" The hoodie man shifted, just slightly. His chair scraped softly against the floor as he adjusted, and in that small sound, the room seemed to hold its breath. Every eye was on him now. The waitstaff froze mid-step. The pianist's fingers hovered over the keys without playing. Even Victor hesitated, though he tried to hide it behind a scoff. The man placed both hands on the table and pushed himself up slowly, deliberately. And when he stood, he towered. He was massive, his frame filling the space like a shadow stretching across the room. His posture was straight, powerful, unshakable. His hood slipped slightly, revealing a jawline, a familiar shape of a face seen on countless screens. Gasp rippled across the restaurant. "Oh my God," someone whispered near the door. "Wait, isn't that? It is him," another voice confirmed, trembling with disbelief. Phones rose higher now, no longer discreet. Eyes widened, mouths dropped open. The murmurs grew louder, folding into one collective realization that hung in the air. The man in the hoodie reached up slowly, pulled back the hood and let it fall to his shoulders. His face was clear now, strong, determined, recognizable to almost everyone in the room. The whispers erupted into a wave of awe. "It's The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and oh my God. No way, that's really him." The shift was instant. The arrogance, the tension, the cruelty, swept away in a heartbeat, replaced by disbelief and reverence. People who had once smirked at Victor now stared at the man who had risen. Victor's smirk faltered. His laughter died in his throat. For the first time that evening, his posture slipped, his shoulders sinking ever so slightly. He tried to recover, forcing a laugh, but it sounded weak, hollow. "Well," he said, voice trembling just enough for those nearby to hear. "Looks like the circus brought its star," but no one laughed with him this time. The Rock's eyes met Victor's. They weren't filled with anger nor contempt. They carried something deeper. Weight, patience, the quiet strength of a man who had seen the world from the bottom, top, and knew the value of both. He stepped forward, each movement slow, deliberate, his presence pressing down on the room with invisible force. Every table he passed seemed to shrink, guests straightening, breaths caught. The suspense grew heavier with every step. Victor leaned back, suddenly aware of how small his gold watch looked, how shallow his laughter sounded, how empty his pride felt. And the old man, still clutching his wallet, lifted his head just enough to see the towering figure moving toward him. For the first time that evening, hope flickered in his tired eyes. The Rock stopped at the edge of the table, his shadow stretched across the linen, across the soup bowl, across Victor himself. The room was silent again, dead silent. The reveal, the silence was deafening. The man in the hoodie, now fully standing, reached up slowly and pulled back the last piece of cover, a pair of dark sunglasses he had worn low across his eyes. With one smooth motion, he removed them and set them down on the table. Gasps echoed through the restaurant like a wave crashing against rocks. "It's him," a young man at the bar whispered, his voice cracking. "It's The Rock," someone else exclaimed louder this time. And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. The murmurs turned into gasps, the gasps into astonished exclamations. Diners leaned out of their chairs, craning their necks for a better view. Phones shot into the air, cameras flickering on as people recorded the moment. Some stood up, clapping hands over their mouths, unable to believe that the man who had sat so quietly in the corner all evening was none other than Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The pianist at the grand piano froze completely, his jaw dropping as his fingers hovered uselessly over the keys. Waiters stopped mid-step, balancing trays that suddenly felt as light as air. Even the maitre d' stumbled a step forward, his rehearsed poise abandoned, eyes wide with panic at the realization of who was now commanding his restaurant. Vanessa, the flight attendant who had mocked Mr. Harris only moments earlier, went pale as porcelain, the confidence drained from her face replaced by a hollow dread. Her mouth opened but no sound escaped, and Victor's smirk, the grin he had worn so smugly all evening, vanished. His jaw tightened, his hands fidgeted with his golden watch. His eyes darted around the room, searching for allies, but he found none. All the admiration he thought he had commanded was now pouring toward the man standing before him. The Rock didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. His presence alone shifted the entire balance of the room. The same calmness that had made him invisible moments ago now filled the air like thunder before a storm. Then slowly he turned his gaze toward the frail old man at the table. Mr. Harris was still clutching his worn wallet, his fingers trembling against the faded leather. His lips quivered as he looked up, disbelief in his eyes. The Rock stepped forward, his boots pressed softly against the polished marble, yet every step echoed louder than Victor's booming laughter had minutes earlier. He moved with purpose, but not aggression, each movement deliberate, steady, filled with compassion and strength. When he reached the table, he didn't tower over Mr. Harris as Victor had. Instead, he lowered himself slightly, placing one massive hand gently on the table. With the other, he reached down and slid the small leather billfold from the edge of the soup bowl. The old man blinked, startled. I'm sorry, Mr. Harris stammered. I didn't mean to cause. The Rock shook his head softly, silencing him without a word. He opened the billfold, glanced at the small slip of paper tucked inside, and then slipped it back shut. His movements were slow, deliberate, as though each step of this act meant more than the paper itself. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black card. It gleamed under the chandelier light, a symbol not of arrogance but of the ease with which he could correct the cruelty unfolding before him. "I'll pay for his meal," The Rock said, his voice deep, resonant, filling every corner of the restaurant. The room exhaled in one collective gasp, but he didn't stop there. He straightened, looking around the room, meeting the eyes of diners one by one. His expression softened into a smile, calm, humble, but filled with resolve. "In fact," he continued, holding the black card up just slightly, "I'll pay for everyone's meal tonight." The silence shattered. Applause erupted, loud and unrestrained. Guests clapped, some rising to their feet, others cheering, others crying as the emotion of the moment overcame them. Phones flashed, recording, live streaming, capturing history in the making. Lena's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Relief and gratitude surged through her chest. Gratitude not just for the old man, but for the humanity she had fought so hard to believe in. Mr. Harris's lips trembled. His frail hands shook, not from weakness, but from awe. He blinked rapidly, his eyes wet, his throat working as he tried to form words. Victor sat frozen, his face drained of color. He gripped the armrest of his chair so tightly his knuckles went white. The weight of humiliation pressed down on him. His voice, his mockery, his cruelty, now exposed under the blinding light of compassion. Even Vanessa lowered her head, her arrogant posture collapsing into shame. The Rock didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice, didn't bask in applause. He simply handed the black card to the nearest waiter, his massive hand closing around the young man's trembling fingers to steady him. "Take care of it," he said quietly. The waiter nodded, nearly stumbling backward with emotion, clutching the card as though it were sacred. The Rock turned back to Mr. Harris. He knelt slightly enough to meet him at eye level, his tone gentle but firm. "You've got nothing to apologize for," he said. "Not tonight." steady and unshakable, as though reminding the entire room what true strength looked like. And in that moment, every person present understood. Power wasn't in the suit. Power wasn't in the watch. Power wasn't in mocking those with less. Power was in this, in dignity restored, in compassion made visible, in one man choosing to lift another, even when the world told him to step aside. The Rock had revealed himself, not just in name, but in character, and the room would never forget it. Scene 6. The Rock's powerful words, the applause was still echoing through the restaurant, bouncing off the chandeliers and walls. But the Rock didn't raise his hands, didn't bow, didn't act like a star basking in glory. Instead, he turned, slowly, deliberately, and locked eyes with Victor. The clapping died down, as though the room itself knew the show wasn't over. Something heavier was about to drop. Victor shifted in his seat, his once perfect posture collapsing under the weight of those eyes. He tried to smirk, but the corners of his lips betrayed him twitching nervously. His fingers tapped against the golden watch on his wrist, the same watch he had flaunted earlier as though it could still shield him. The Rock took a step closer. "Victor, right?" he asked, his voice deep, smooth, carrying through the room, like rolling thunder. Victor cleared his throat. Yes. You think money makes you better than others?" The Rock asked plainly. Victor opened his mouth, but no words came. The Rock didn't wait, because if that's what you believe. He paused, glancing around the room, making sure everyone could hear. "Then you've already lost everything that really matters." The words hit like a hammer. Diners leaned in, holding their breath. Phones that had been lifted to record now stayed frozen in the air, their owners too entranced to move. The Rock turned his gaze away from Victor and back to the room, addressing everyone. His voice lowered, not to soften, but to deepen its weight. "You see, I know what it's like to be judged by appearances. I know what it feels like when people look at you and decide you're not enough." He paused, his eyes flicking briefly, to Lena. She stood motionless near Mr. Harris, her hands clasped against her apron, her chest rising and falling quickly, as though she was holding back sobs. "I wasn't born into luxury," the Rock continued. "When I was 14, I watched my mother cry as we were evicted from our home. We had nothing. I remember standing in the street watching her pack up what little we owned and thinking, how did life come to this?" The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the chandelier lights. "At one point in my life, I had just $7 in my pocket," he said, holding up his hand, showing 7 fingers for emphasis. $7, that's all. No mansion, no cars, no gold watches. Just $7 and a dream I wasn't sure I'd ever catch. Victor swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. His golden watch suddenly felt like shackles on his wrist. The Rock's tone softened. "So don't talk to me about appearances. Don't tell me what kind of suit someone's wearing, or what kind of watch they have. I've seen people with nothing show more class, more dignity, and more courage than people with millions in the bank." He turned his eyes back to Victor, piercing, unrelenting. "If you think mocking an old man proves you're powerful, let me tell you something, it doesn't. It only proves you're weak." A ripple of emotion ran through the restaurant. Some diners shifted uncomfortably, realizing they too had laughed, even quietly, at Victor's cruelty. Others nodded, tears forming in their eyes. Lena wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, her eyes shining with gratitude. This wasn't just about Mr. Harris. It was about every single person she had ever defended, every cruel remark she had ever endured while trying to stay professional. Scene 7. The old man's truth. The Rock's words still hung in the air like the fading echo of thunder. Diners sat motionless, eyes wide, hearts pounding. Victor slumped in his seat, stripped of arrogance, while Lena stood silently, her hands trembling at her sides. But then the Rock did something no one expected. He didn't press Victor further. He didn't raise his voice or bask in the applause. Instead, he turned, slowly, purposefully, back to the frail man sitting at the table. Mr. Harris. The old man looked overwhelmed, his wrinkled fingers still clutching his worn wallet like a lifeline. His lips trembled, his eyes wet, but his gaze was fixed on the rock as though the giant before him wasn't a celebrity, but a guardian sent at just the right time. The rock crouched slightly, lowering himself again so he could meet Mr. Harris at eye level. His tone softened, filled with kindness. "Sir," he said, "if you don't mind, I think the people here need to hear your story." The old man blinked, startled. "My story?" His voice cracked, thin from years of hardship. "Yes," the rock replied, steady and encouraging. "Because I think if they knew who you really are, no one in this room would ever dare to look down on you again." The restaurant went utterly silent. Forks rested on plates, glasses were set down carefully, even breaths seemed to hush themselves. All eyes shifted to the old man who, for the first time that night, no longer looked invisible. Mr. Harris swallowed, hard. He glanced at Lena, whose tear-filled eyes gave him courage, and then at the rock, whose nod of reassurance steadied his trembling hands. Slowly, he began to speak. I worked construction all my life," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying weight in the silence. 47 years of lifting bricks, pouring cement, building homes I could never afford to live in myself. Gasps rippled softly through the crowd. A few diners exchanged glances, suddenly ashamed of how they had sized him up moments earlier. "Met my wife when I was just 20. Mr. Harris continued, his lips twitching into the faintest smile. "She was the kindest woman I'd ever known. We had nothing, but she made every day feel like everything. We raised a daughter together. Life wasn't easy, but it was ours." His smile faltered. His voice broke. Then, she got sick. The rock lowered his head respectfully, wiped her cheeks again, already fighting fresh tears. "For years I watched her fight," Mr. Harris whispered. "And for years I worked double shifts, triple shifts, anything to pay for the hospital bills. I sold my car, my furniture, every little thing of value we had. In the end," his voice cracked completely, "in the end I couldn't save her." A lump formed in the throats of many listeners. Even the maitre d' who had spent the evening worrying about appearances now dabbed at his eyes with the corner of a white napkin. Mr. Harris pulled the old wallet closer to his chest as though it contained not just scraps of money but memories. "After she passed, I didn't care about money anymore. I just cared about keeping a roof over my head. My savings, gone. My retirement, gone. But I kept going, because I still had my daughter and now my granddaughter." He lifted his eyes, watery but proud. "She's the light of my life, the first in our family to go to college. Tomorrow she graduates, and I saved for months, every coin, every dollar, so I could take the bus, buy one nice meal, and then travel to see her walk across that stage." He paused, his voice trembling. "That soup tonight, it wasn't just food. It was a celebration. My way of saying to myself, you made it, old man. You survived. And now, you get to see her future." By now, many diners were openly weeping. A woman covered her face with both hands. A young man shook his head, whispering, "God, I misjudged him." Even Vanessa, the arrogant flight attendant who had mocked him, bit her lip hard, her cheeks burning red with shame. Victor sat frozen, his pride crumbling with every word. The watch on his wrist no longer glistened, it mocked him. Mr. Harris sighed deeply. "I never wanted to be a burden. That's why I ordered the cheapest thing. I thought I had just enough. But when I opened my wallet and saw I was short," his voice faltered again. "I felt like I failed. Failed my wife. Failed my family. Failed myself." The silence that followed was so profound, it felt like the walls themselves were listening. Then softly a voice broke through. "I'm sorry." Everyone turned. It was Victor. His head was lowered, his voice hushed but clear. "I'm sorry. first time that night, there was no arrogance, no smirk, just a man stripped bare of pride. The rock remained quiet, allowing the moment to breathe. Lena placed a gentle hand on Mr. Harris's shoulder, whispering, "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." And in that instant, the entire restaurant felt transformed. The old man, who had once seemed like a shadow in the corner, now stood as the heart of the room. His truth had stripped away every layer of vanity, every mask of arrogance, leaving only raw humanity behind. Redemption and unity. For a long moment, silence ruled the restaurant. Mr. Harris's story had left everyone shaken. The air felt heavier, yet strangely lighter, like a burden had been lifted off more than just one man's shoulders. Victor sat frozen, his pride stripped bare, his golden watch now nothing more than a hollow ornament. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, wrestling with emotions he had never allowed himself to feel in public. Guilt, shame, regret. Then, slowly, he stood. "I'll pay for it," Victor said, his voice hoarse. At first, no one understood. His hands trembled slightly as he reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out his sleek black wallet. "I'll pay for Mr. Harris's flight home. First class, no delays, no struggles. It's the least I can do after what I said." The room collectively gasped. Some looked at him with disbelief, others with cautious hope. Victor's face burned red with humility as he continued. "I can't undo what I did tonight, but maybe I can start making it right." The rock nodded, his massive arms crossed over his chest, his gaze steady. "That's a start, Victor. But remember, this isn't about money. It's about respect. Don't just pay for his ticket. Learn from this. Change from this." Victor lowered his eyes and gave a small, genuine nod. For once, there was no arrogance in him, just a man, humbled by truth. Lena stepped forward then, her voice breaking with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered to the rock, her eyes shimmering with tears. "I don't know what would have happened tonight without you." The rock placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to thank me, Lena. The strength you showed defending Mr. Harris, that was more powerful than anything I said." Lena shook her head, her tears spilling freely now. "But you reminded me, why kindness matters. Sometimes working here I forget. Tonight you gave that back to me." Mr. Harris struggled to rise from his chair, but the rock immediately extended a steady hand, lifting him effortlessly. The old man's frail hand rested in the rock's enormous grip, trembling but strong with newfound pride. "You reminded me I still matter," Mr. Harris whispered, his voice breaking. His eyes glistened as he looked up at the man towering over him. "For so long I felt invisible. Tonight, you gave me back my dignity." The rock leaned closer, his voice low but powerful. "Sir, you never lost it. The world just forgot to see it. But your story, your life, that's worth more than any gold watch in this room." The words brought fresh tears to the eyes of nearly everyone present. A woman in pearls pressed her napkin to her face. A businessman cleared his throat loudly, pretending he wasn't crying. Even Vanessa, the arrogant attendant who had once sneered, now stood off to the side, her arms folded across her chest, not in defiance but in shame. Then, something remarkable happened. One diner, a middle-aged man in a suit, stood up and spoke. "Sir," he said to Mr. Harris, his voice steady but emotional, "let us help too. Please let me cover your hotel for the night. You shouldn't have to worry about anything before seeing your granddaughter." Another woman rose. "And I'll take care of new clothes for him. Something sharp for the graduation ceremony." A younger couple chimed in. "We'll contribute too, whatever he needs." One by one, diners across the room stood, offering what they could. Some offered money, others offered connections, all offered kindness. The atmosphere of the restaurant, once dripping with arrogance and exclusion, now overflowed with compassion and unity. Lena sobbed openly, overwhelmed by the outpouring of humanity. She clasped her hands together, whispering, This choosing to lift each other up. Mr. Harris, humbled but glowing with pride, looked at each of them in turn. His voice trembled, but it carried strength. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. For so long I thought the world had forgotten men like me. Tonight you've shown me I was wrong. The diners applauded. Not for the Rock this time, but for Mr. Harris. For his endurance, his humility, his life. Victor, still standing awkwardly, raised his hand. His voice was quiet, almost pleading. Mr. Harris, I hope you'll let me pay for that flight, please. It's something I need to do. The old man studied him for a long moment, then nodded. If it helps you as much as it helps me, then yes, I'll accept. Victor's lips quivered as he whispered, "Thank you." And just like that, the arrogance that had poisoned the night dissolved. What remained was something purer, something rare. Unity. The Rock stepped back, watching the scene unfold. He didn't raise his hands or claim the credit. He simply stood, quiet, calm, content. He had lit the spark, but it was the people, the waitress, the old man, even the humbled rich man who had carried the flame. The restaurant, once filled with whispers of mockery, now rang with voices of kindness. Strangers who had entered as individuals left as something more, connected, united by one unforgettable night. And in the corner, unnoticed by many, the Rock pulled his hood back over his head, slipping once again into humility. Because for him it had never been about recognition. It had always been about reminding people of one simple truth. Respect costs nothing, but it can change everything. The restaurant had returned to a gentle hum, but it was not the same hum as before. Hours earlier it had been filled with the clatter of silverware, the rustle of silk dresses, and the shallow laughter of people eager to flaunt their wealth. Now it pulsed with something else entirely. Compassion, unity, humility. The Rock stood tall in the center of it all, his hood once again draped over his head, as though reminding everyone that this moment was never about fame. He had not come here for recognition. He had come here as a reminder. Narrator's voice swells, steady and emotional. On that night, a wealthy man learned that arrogance is weakness, not strength. For all his riches, Victor discovered how empty status is when it is not balanced with humility. His gold watch, once a symbol of pride, became nothing more than a reflection of his own insecurity. But when he chose to lay down his pride and lift another man up, he began his first step toward real wealth, the kind measured not in money, but in character. The humble waitress discovered that kindness has power. Lena, weary and worn from her long shifts, could have turned her back on Mr. Harris, but she didn't. She treated him with dignity when no one else would. Her tears were not weakness, they were strength. The strength of someone who dared to stand up for compassion, even when mocked for it. And an old man was reminded that dignity cannot be bought or stolen. Mr. Harris came into that restaurant, believing he was small, believing that his worth was tied to the coins in his pocket. But by the end of the night, he left with his head held high, knowing that his life, his sacrifices, and his love for his family made him richer than anyone in that room. And when the world needed it most, the Rock, one of the most powerful souls, stood, up not with fists but with words and compassion. He reminded the room and perhaps the world that true greatness is not measured by how high you stand above others, but by how far you are willing to reach down to lift someone else up. The music, in the background, swells with emotion, strings and piano echoing the weight of the moment. The narrator's voice drops lower, filled with conviction. Remember this. True greatness is never measured by wealth, but by the way we treat those who have less. Respect costs nothing, but it can change everything. The final image lingers. Mr. Harris leaving the restaurant, his wallet still nearly empty, but his heart full. Victor, humbled, walking behind him, his steps slower, his posture different, as though carrying the weight of his own lesson. Lena, smiling through her tears, knowing she had witnessed something unforgettable. And the Rock, slipping out quietly into the night, disappearing as silently as he had appeared, leaving only the memory of a man who used his strength not to intimidate, but to heal. Narrator's final words. So the next time you see someone struggling, remember Mr. Harris.